Yo, listeners, welcome to Tetsuo Tells a Story. I'm Tetsuo. In this episode, the main stories are from the Hmong community in Wausau, Wisconsin. So the first story is from a subscriber in Wisconsin. The second story is posted in the Hmong Ghost Stories Facebook page by someone anonymous. The post to the story is linked below. Some names and details may have been edited to remove identifying features or to fix the flow of the story. So remember to like, share, and subscribe to Tetsuo Tells a Story on YouTube and podcast providers. So let's get on with these two Hmong scary stories from the Wausau, Wisconsin area. Story 1, titled Make Way for My Girlfriend. So this story takes place somewhere in central Wisconsin in the early 1990s. I've only heard it from Hmong folks in the Wausau area, so I'm guessing that's where it is. Anyways, this story is about a guy named David Tao. You see, David was deeply in love with a young lady named Lisa. And Lisa felt the same way too. After they both graduated high school, they both made a promise, a blood oath promise. They pricked their fingers with a pen and drank each other's blood, making a promise that they'll be together forever, dead or alive. After high school, David stayed in the community and worked in the assembly lines for a packing company, while Lisa went to college at the University of Minnesota. They did their best trying to make things work long distance. However, one day, there was a knock on David's door, and it was Lisa's father. Lisa's father said,
David, I know you love my daughter, but you need to stop seeing her. You're stuck at a dead-end job with no future. We want the best for her, and if you love her, you break up with her. You see, we intend to have an arranged marriage for her, with a young man with a bright future.
David responded, Yes, sir, I totally understand, and I too want the best for her. I will let her know.
Good to hear that, son. I'm glad we understand one another.
Lisa's father responded, and like that, David broke up with Lisa. Weeks went by and no news of Lisa. David did the same old things. Went to his dead-end job, come home, sleep, rinse and repeat. Out of the blue, David was informed that Lisa had committed suicide. Lisa was arranged to be married, but declined. The pressure from her family to marry a man that she did not love was all too much, and ultimately, she took her own life. At Lisa's funeral, David couldn't stop crying. Though Lisa's father apologized to David, the damage was already done. Lisa is gone forever. Or is she? Legend has it that David never left the funeral home that day, even as Lisa's family buried her at the cemetery. From then on, local folks would see David every weekend at the funeral home, talking to someone. When you ask him who he's talking to, he'd say,
Oh, 구탄터 구트론가서 구트론가 부정가태야.
I'm talking to my girlfriend. Isn't she beautiful? It is said that, to this day, at Hmong funerals in the Midwest, you can still find David moping around like a crazed man, talking with Lisa and saying things like, Everyone, please make way for my girlfriend. She is entering. Story 2, titled Wausau, First Avenue Massacre. Wausau, Wisconsin is known to the Hmong community as one of the ghostliest cities that the Hmong reside. You hear stories such as haunted houses, haunted parks, Indian burial grounds, haunted lakes and rivers, and lastly, haunted shelter homes for juveniles, and so forth. I've lived in Wausau for over 10 years, and I saw my share of the supernatural. I even lived in a haunted house at one point, but to my good fortune, I've never experienced any spirits or poltergeist in that house. Before my mom and dad moved into our new home on First Avenue, they remodeled the entire house. They were quite excited about the move. However, before the move, my mom whispered to me when we did a walkthrough that the prior family who lived in the house had experienced ghostly activities on a normal basis. My mom reminded me that I have no worries because she had the powers of a shaman and she would be able to lock away these spirits. We lived in that house for nearly 4 years and never experienced any bad occurrences. However, what shocked me came next. The following 4 families that came and rented from my father all but left within a year. The first family stayed in the house for about 6 months, but never gave a good explanation as to why they left. We did hear rumors from other Hmong families of the ghostly experiences encountered. The second family was my father's older brother, my uncle. My uncle heard stories of the house, but he took a chance with knowing that my family never experienced any ghosts. They lived in it for about a year until they decided to move on. Stories of the house soon came out that my uncle's daughter kept encountering an old lady in the shower. She would be yelling at her from outside the tub,
"Get out of my house!"
Some of the other children would speak of seeing or hearing the old lady as well. Not to mention, perhaps, the most haunted area in the house, the basement. The children often heard weird noises and saw shadows move throughout the basement. The third family was a family friend. He, his wife, and children lived in the house for nearly 1 year. Again, no complaints until they had completely cleaned house. Rumors were that his family kept seeing little children running back and forth in the hallway upstairs. They heard all sorts of weird noises and saw all sorts of shadow floating around the house. A story was told that the daughter broke up with her boyfriend. The boyfriend came over one night demanding that they get back together. The parents weren't home and she avoided him by not opening the door. He pounded and pounded the door, saying that he would never leave without a girlfriend. He walked away mad, and then suddenly, an old white lady starts running towards him from the direction of the house, screaming and yelling,
"Take me with you!"
He ran away as fast as possible. The fourth was my father's nephew, or my cousin. He decided to move in until he and my dad can find someone to buy the house. They hired a shaman to come and perform some ritual. The shaman claimed that he had taken the old lady ghost and tied her to a tree outside of the home, so now no one has to worry. However, my cousin only stayed for about 1 month and moved out immediately. He didn't really say much, but showed signs of being traumatized. The home soon went into foreclosure. It sat in the market for around 2 years without a buyer. The city finally tore it down. About a year after the home was torn down, my uncle and I sat at a bar talking, and he asked me if I knew what happened in that house. I told him no. He said a couple years ago he looked up the house at a local library and found out there was a tragic incident that happened in the early 1900s. The basement was actually once a bar. The owner served alcohol every night to earn wages, to raise his family, a wife, and 2 kids. Late one night, the bar owner, suddenly outraged when the bar was coming to a close, and murdered several of the remaining customers in his bar, went upstairs to the first level, and killed his old maid in the bathtub by drowning her, and finally went upstairs and murdered his wife and 2 kids. He then hung himself. Thanks everyone for listening in on these 2 scary stories from Wisconsin. If you enjoyed these 2 stories, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to Tetsuo Tells a Story. Again, you can find me here on YouTube and podcast providers such as Anchor, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, and more. Do you have a story to tell? Let me know and I can read it to the world. See you in the next episode.